what other parts of AI governance needs to be done now that what would be your next project, basically?
Yeah, it's a good question. So my team at Red, we think a lot about export controls and we think about failure modes. That like I talked about the TSMC one earlier, but there's like smuggling, there's cloud compute. Like Chinese companies can still use the cloud, so that seems like a thing that we should probably fix. So we're like thinking about these kind of things, and then there's other questions about like visibility. So we're looking into more data on how much compute is being produced, like how quickly can compute production increase, where's the compute going, like how many companies have what amount of compute. And then there's like a lot of technical questions. So you have this new paradigm, which is like reasoning models and increasingly agentic models. So you have RL training. So we're thinking about how does this change the way that people train AI models? Is this going to change chip demand? Is this going to change like how we can track compute? Because like one easy way to do like a first pass on how capable a model is by just looking at how much computer was trained on. So we're thinking about like, is this still true? What if like you use a lot of RL and like the RL actually only uses a little bit of compute but makes the model way more capable? And like our current best guess is like, yeah, you can still roughly like compute is still the best proxy you can have to like assess a model's capabilities. So like we're thinking about these kind of things, and all that we do in my eyes is like trying to help policymakers think clearly about how compute could be a tool for AI governance. And there's like three big buckets that I see here. One is visibility. So we want to help policymakers understand who can train models, like who has access to these GPUs, and like who's producing the GPUs that then go to these companies. The second one is allocation. So you can make sure that the right people have access to GPUs. One thing that we see in the data set is that, as I said, like governments are actually like only 20% now. That seems like a bad thing to me because it means that people in academia or like people in like working for the government, they don't have the same access to very large compute resources anymore. And it means that it's harder for them to deploy large models and do important research on like interpretability or fairness, etc. So like that's maybe one concern. So maybe one thing you want to do is like allocate more compute to AI safety research so that people like who are really passionate about that and want to do that can still pursue that kind of research and aren't forced to work with like very small models because they just can't afford the large scale compute. So that's the second one, allocation. And the third one is enforcement. And enforcement is something like semiconductor export controls, making sure the compute doesn't fall into the wrong hands. But in the future, it might also be we actually see like people misusing AI models for, say, like bioweapons development, for say cyber attacks, etc. How can we make sure that like cloud companies have protocols in place to check what kind of things people are using their compute for? And this would be enforcement, so making sure that people don't use them for the wrong thing. So like we have these broad three goals that we're trying to work on. One is visibility, one is allocation, and one is enforcement. And we're like giving policymakers tools to understand and then potentially implement any kind of AI policy they may want to enact.
Right. So export controls, like the reasons for the export controls, that is that we don't want China to have strong AI that can be economically productive, and then they become like a bigger economy than us, or is it like we don't want China to have chips to do military stuff, or is there someone who's saying like we don't want China to have chips because they might develop like the AGI that takes over?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not working in the government, so I'm not sure like what these discussions look like day to day. But my impression is that like probably like each of these three perspectives exists. So like there's some people who say this is just like China is clearly misusing these for military purposes. We obviously don't want US technology to go to the Chinese military and then like they're invading Taiwan with US technology. That seems like a really bad thing. So like that is part of it. But like also on the other hand, like can you really prevent China from like doing like any given military simulation by cutting them off from US chips? Like they can probably still like smuggle some amount of chips and they can still like use their domestic chips like just less effectively. They can still run the same simulation. So I'm like not entirely sure like how strong that argument is, but like increasingly there is more of this ecosystem perspective of like the less AI chips China has, the harder it is for them to compete on AI, because if you're training a large model, the more compute you have, the better the model is going to be. If you're doing experiments, the more compute you have, the more experiments you can run in the same time. If you're running inference, the more compute you have, the more instances of an AI model can you run, the more users can you serve. So that's part of it. And then there is, I think, some voices who say, wow, what if AGI comes like in 2 years? Do we really want China to have like half of all the world's compute and basically like be able to compete with the US and just like develop AGI before? Do we want China to like control maybe the most consequential technology developed in the 21st century? So like I think there are also these voices. In practice, what policymakers usually work like is like they don't have this like one unitary worldview. They're kind of like operating between all these worldviews that different people around them are using, and then they're like optimizing for something in between. And that's probably what the export controls are about today.
Are there any people in the government who are AGI pilled?
Yeah, I think there was like a report last year that was calling for like a Manhattan Project for AGI. So like definitely are some people who are AGI pilled. I mean, Elon Musk is famously AGI pilled, and like the people in his environment. I think like not I think we don't see people in the government who are like, this is the single biggest thing and like this is the only thing that matters this year. Like even Elon Musk seems to be doing like a lot of things and besides like thinking about AI. So like it doesn't seem like even he has like a worldview where this is the primary thing that he's concerned about. So I don't think there are people in like leading positions in the government who are like taking it super seriously, but I think there are like lots of people in the government who are thinking about this at least part-time and like aware that there are people like Benji and Hinton who are saying like this could go really wrong.